Hello there, and welcome to the Get French Football News Preview Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening is Jeremy Smith. The window is now behind us, and European football is now gently coming up on the horizon. Everything is now hotting up to what matters on the field now that take focus from now until the end of the season. But before we preview another heavy-hitting weekend of French football, here are the latest headlines. On Tuesday evening, Marseille were in Ligue 1 action as an empty Velodrome bore witness to a 1-0 win against Bordeaux. Boubacar Kamara's grabbed his first league goal to earn victory as Samuel Kalou saw red for the away side early on. Elsewhere on that day, there was Coupe de France action as Dijon, Orléans and Nantes all advanced, while Caen needed penalties to overcome Bastia on the same evening. On Wednesday, a slightly hungover, it seemed, Paris Saint-Germain required extra time to claim a 3-0 win away to Villefranche-Belgeois. Vitre knocked out Lyon-La-Duchère in a lower league clash, while Rennes went behind to 10-man Lille but came back to win 2-1. Thursday this evening, in fact, has seen Lyon go through to the next round with a 2-1 victories. Goals from Moussa Dembele and Maxwell Cornet earned them passage to the next round, while Alexander Mendy's sort of rebuttal in the 80th minute was not enough for the bottom league side. And that's all for now. But for all the latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this evening by diving straight into the previews, and we've got 5 games for you this evening, and full of sides that were in cup action and league action as well. And we'll start with the game on Saturday between Paris and Bordeaux, and it's been a pretty funny week really for PSG. Probably the strangest one they've had this season, Jez. Obviously they lost at the weekend, as we discussed on the main show, to Lyon, their first loss in the Ligue this season, and then even a relatively decent side couldn't really put away Villefranche-Beaujolais in normal time, which seems very strange for a PSG side that are usually very professional in these cup competitions, you would say. Is there a little bit of naivety creeping into this side after you would think you'd see a reaction from that result of the weekend, but instead we got a pretty tame one?
Yeah, I think it's hard to, in terms of talking of reaction, it's in a way it's hard to compare the two matches just because two different competitions, two very different kinds of opposition, and for the most part, two different teams that lined up for PSG. But I don't know if it's the sort of spectre of the big match against Man United looming large, but it just seems that the club as a whole at the moment are a little bit distracted and sort of focusing on anything but the football on the pitch. So we sort of had the transfer window and all the stuff about will they or won't they bring midfielders in, and now that that's happened and it didn't go as well as they thought it was going to, will Rabiot come in? Then there's been the Neymar and Verratti injuries, and this week quite a lot of talk about Neymar's party and whether a couple of injured players, including Neymar himself, should be seen to be publicly partying so hard. There's been all the stuff about whether or not PSG have been victims of rough treatment and whether the referees are giving them enough protection. It's something that Tuchel's got quite worked up about the last 2 or 3 matches, to the extent that he was sent off during the Villefranche match. So I don't know if it's nerves as Man United approach, but it just feels that the club as a whole, in a way, has kind of taken their eye off the ball.
I think that's quite a concise way of really putting it, to be honest. It seems like that ever since really they've come back from the winter break. I mean, they were pretty positive that they kept on getting results, but the nonsense in the transfer window, from Frenkie de Jong sort of slipping through their grasp to people like Uli Hoeneß saying how sort of embarrassing it is to have Henrique in charge of transfer deals, and if PSG wanted to move forward, they maybe need someone else. And then the fact that Paredes signing sort of went forever, and Tuchel sort of even took a joke to it. It seems that then distracted them once Neymar got injured as well. And like you say, the red party, as they might want to call it, really, everyone was dressed in red for that evening, sort of just continued to distract his teammates, from Dani Alves performing live, which I'm sure was a treat for everyone in attendance, and everyone else seeming to enjoy themselves. But at the same time, it all seems like they're taking a little bit of the eye off the ball. We already know that Neymar's going to be missing the game. The big one as well is that they've still not got confirmation that Marco Verratti will be even close to being fit for that game. There's only an hour in on that stage, and you may hope that because of the separation of the Champions League ties now, that he might be able to make that March tie in the second leg, but it's increasingly unlikely that he might make that game on the 12th unless something dramatic happens. So you start to worry about where they're staging the season, and they're coming up against a Bordeaux side that was the one that caused the first dropping points this season for them in that draw back in Bordeaux at the Matmoutal Antique. They've had a pretty poor result, though, at midweek. I watched that game, and I know you kept your eyes on it, Jez. While it was a strange one, wasn't it? I mean, I thought, first of all, that Samuel Kalou had slipped for the red card that was around 20 minutes, but obviously on further replays you can kind of tell that he's just done a sort of, I don't think it's intentionally trying to hurt someone. I think it's more that he's just been a bit stupid more than anything, and has cleaned out the opponent and deservedly saw red. And after that it was more of a training match, and more thanks to Benoit Costil that it wasn't really, and well, Marseille's ineptitude of scoring as well, that it wasn't any more really. But it's kind of been a microcosm of Bordeaux season. They have moments, they've got an okay squad, but they seem to drift between something okay to something pretty appalling. And when you think their last three results in all competitions have been defeats, including 2 to Strasbourg recently, they're sort of drifting in this mid-table position at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, I think you described it pretty well there. They seem close to embarking on something, and I know in midweek, I think it was Christophe Dugarry was saying he quite likes the Bordeaux projects at the moment and what they're doing. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure what they are doing really. And it's exactly as you said, they've got some good players. They're kind of beginning of a good squad. And every time it feels like they're starting to do something, recently they picked up a couple of wins at the end of January. Then they sort of go back into the doldrums. And the 2 Strasbourg matches, I think they were slightly unlucky. First one going down to an injury time winner, and then 3-2 in the semi-final, which was a reasonable match. I don't think it helped that the new American president, and I'm not sure how much he actually knows about football, but really publicly slated the players. But I didn't, even in those 2 matches, I think there was sort of I can't think of the phrase, green roots or whatever of recovery. And then the Marseille match was, it was awful, and it was like, I mean, it's easy to say it was affected by the sending off, but you still would have expected a better performance than that. And exactly as you said, if it wasn't for Costa, it would have been a lot heavier. Maybe it has something to do with Marseille playing better when they don't have all their fans on their back, but you still would have hoped that Bordeaux would put up more of a fight than that. And coming into a visit to PSG, is it at PSG?
Yes, this is at the Parc des Princes. Yeah.
It's not the ideal match and the ideal form to go into that match. And I guess that their only hope will be that PSG remain sort of distracted and maybe rest a few players with Man United coming up. Otherwise, it's hard to see anything but a very comfortable PSG win.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that they've got sort of murkiness on the back end of their end, because they obviously have Ricardo Gomes as sort of quote unquote manager, but that's kind of how it is with this sort of with the qualifications he doesn't have to be officially manager. So they technically have Eric Bedouet as their head coach, and they keep focusing in on him sometimes on the TV screens and bits like that. And it must be that weird, strange mixed messaging that the players get, seeing that one coach is the sort of one that gives them the tactical brief, but then one is the name on the sheet. It must not help a side that let some players go. But I'd like to. I'm looking forward to seeing Adley if and when he does play for Bordeaux, and see if he is the talent that's coming up. But very quickly on this one, before we get our predictions, at least I do want to mention something else that's come off the pitch, at least for PSG. And I know you like your shady dealing sometimes, Jez. That obviously the PSG boss Nasser El Khelaïfi has been elected to UEFA Executive Committee with DFB support, which is the German FA. It's concerning, given not just his role at PSG, but we are led to believe that he's going to stand down from his role with beIN Sports, who obviously have an invested interest in the Champions League, given that they have the rights for it in several different territories. It seems like a slightly strange move that. I don't think that there's any. I don't want to discredit him himself, but it does seem a little strange and questionable, doesn't it?
He seems to have his fingers in a lot of pies, and yeah, I'm not saying that there's anything dodgy happening, but it does feel like there's a clear conflict of interest, and with all the FFP stuff going on and rumours, or I don't know what the right phrase is, about PSG and Man City and whether they're getting away with things that other teams aren't getting away with, and then the news came out this evening, or there was a report that Marseille could be. I sent a flippant tweet, saying, is it a coincidence that Al-Khelaïfi came in and then Marseille threatened with punishment for breaching FFP? I don't think there's any connection there at all. But if PSG appear to be getting away with flouting FFP, yet clubs who are much poorer are getting punished, that's the way life is, and that's certainly the way football is. But with El Khelaïfi on the executive committee, it's kind of asking for trouble, and it's asking for questions to be asked and not necessarily answered. And I don't think it's a particularly good look. He hasn't done anything wrong. He's, as you said, he's been supported, he's been ratified, and he's there to represent European clubs, and he's joining the president of Juventus. So it's clearly something that's in place and happened before. But it does feel that there's these sort of Qatari tentacles kind of spreading very widely across football, and it doesn't sit comfortably. On the other hand, I suppose from a Ligue 1 point of view, maybe it's a good thing to have stronger Ligue 1 kind of representation higher up. I don't know, but yeah, it all feels a little bit sinister.
Yeah, it feels almost Bond-esque, doesn't it? I know.
Yeah.
I think the fact that there is sort of the Juventus president in situ, then it makes a little bit more sense. But I don't think any way you look at it, when the rule makers are also the people playing the game, it feels a little bit funny regardless. I don't think either of those should really be.
No, exactly. It feels like it should be completely separate.
Yeah, exactly. And like you say, Al Khelaïfi loves having a little bit of a linking every pie. At least let's get your predictions then, Jez. What's your prediction on this one?
I think it should be a comfortable PSG win, and then maybe they'll take their foot off the pedal. So I'll go 2-0.
Yeah, it feels like that one, doesn't it? Especially when if they get into a comfortable lead, it feels like they'll bring a couple of players off and make sure they're nice and well rested for the big game on Tuesday. So I think I'll go for 2-1. Maybe Bordeaux sneak one back when they're sort of making the switch, but it still feels like PSG have got a command, even though the last couple of games have been a little bit strange. On to matters at the other end of the table now, and a big 6-pointer between Amiens and Caen. And starting with the away side, really, they were a little bit unfortunate, really, because they obviously didn't get the game going on the 23rd because of matters outside of their hands. Their game against Nantes was sort of suspended while Nantes played in the Coupe de France after other situations with the Emiliano Sala deal and such, and that's why they'll be playing actually in the week of the Champions League, hosting that game. But that does put them in a bit of a conundrum because they have got a game in hand, but this is a massive one for them. But much like we've said about Caen a number of times in the last couple of years, really, they get to this situation where they are maybe 2-3 points in this moment, literally equal on points with Monaco and Amiens, and they get a result that pulls them just enough away. Does this feel like one of those games where it will turn up, Amiens maybe feel like this is a chance for them to pull out, but in fact it'll be one of those results that finally pulls Com slightly away, but then just keeps them afloat and does the classic thing that they've been doing for the past couple of years?
I think it could well do. I think it's a huge match for both teams. It's one of those ones in the if you're going to make a sort of mini league of what's going on at the bottom of the table and think that those clubs are going to concentrate mainly on those matches and getting the points against their rivals, then it's kind of a must win for both teams. And in a way, are kind of rested because they've had a match or two disrupted because of Gilets jaunes and Nantes and everything. But then on the other hand, they played in the cup in midweek and were taken to penalties. So that could work either way for them, I suppose. Certainly a trip to Bastia and getting out of it, I was going to say alive, I mean alive sort of footballistically, is quite a good battle-hardened thing for them to do. And you look at the team that they fielded against Bastia, and it's still, I think I said the other day, they're a little bit meh of a team, but there are quality players throughout. We talked about Gilbert and what a good signing that was for Villa. Bass is sort of at the wrong end of his career now, but on his day is still good. I think Jiku is another of these very underrated Ligue 1 players. And they have a little bit of flair in terms of players like I never know how to pronounce his name, but Faisal Fire in midfield. And then we said that the strikers they've got, that is where they're all okay, but can you rely on any of them to score the goals? But the thing is that they're the kind of team that if they get their act together on any day, they should be a match for a few of the other teams in the league, and certainly a team like Amiens. So yeah, I think it's a huge match, and if Mercadal can really get them all sort of in the zone, then it could be a big win for them.
Yeah, that's always the funny thing of having a front line of French, Ligue 1 journeymen is maybe the best way of putting it, of Ninga, Bovu, Bamu and Crivelli, that you just know that because they have, at least in very short bursts, you might say, Bovu less so than the other ones, but have sort of scored goals in Liga. You just need a day where one of them's on song and grabs a couple of goals for you and wins you these kind of games, really, because they've been in pretty poor form, really. They lost the last three, but we've mentioned before how important the next sort of, February is for really. This game, obviously, against Amiens is massive. It's a 6-pointer for them, but they've got that rescheduled game against Nantes, which is at home, and Le Canary have not really reinforced massively during the winter break, and they weren't too great so far in January before obviously the most recent disturbances. They've got Strasbourg at home, which is not an easy tie. Toulouse at home, away, which is reasonable. Toulouse have been pretty poor this season, in all honesty. But then March is PSG, Rennes, Saint-Etienne and Monaco, and if Monaco have picked up a couple of points by that point, that's going to be a horrible running, given that then they're starting to look out of time. And that's a similar scenario really for Amiens. We've said for a couple of weeks now that they've got really to finally sort of got out of a bit of a gauntlet really starting January. They not really picked up anything recently, lost their last 5 in a row in all competitions, but they've come against PSG, Lille, Lyon in the Cup, Lyon and Rennes. It's been a terrible time for them, really, unfortunately, how the fixture lay has gone. But now they've got a little bit of respite. Something in this one is absolutely crucial. And the positive they have is that while they've been struggling to score the goals against those big teams, they've not really been hammered by any of those games, really. So the fact that they're keeping themselves in games against these smaller teams that they've got coming up, they've got Caen, obviously, this weekend, Marseille, Nice coming up, but Rennes, Reims, Nîmes, Angers and Bordeaux in March, which is a little bit of a softer schedule for them. It feels like with those games where they've been able to stay in touch, they weren't too bad against Rennes either. They had a couple of chances that it maybe feels like if they can, this is one of those kind of games with the extra reinforcements they have in Eric Peters as well, then they're like that they might have enough to try and sneak this one.
Yeah, they could do. As you said, definitely in recent weeks, they've sort of tightened up in defence. They've been expensive overall, but certainly not in the last month or two. And yeah, they were unlucky against Rennes. As you'd expect, Rennes had most of the play, but I think it was only sort of 10 minutes, 8 minutes before the end that they got the winner. And previous match as well, Lyon again had all the possession, but weren't able to struggle to break Amiens down. So obviously, with all due respect, Caen's attack isn't as good as Lyon's or as good as Rennes has been this year. And if Amiens can keep it just as tight as they have done in the last couple of matches, then they should be confident of keeping a clean sheet. And then once you do that, obviously that it takes some of the onus off, and you only need to sneak one goal to get a result. But I think that's also been a problem, that they're not finding both the goals easy to come by either.
Yeah, and it's just keeping people fit as well, isn't it? I mean, Moussa Konaté's missed some time. It's still waiting for him to come back because he was a real spark in the second half of last season. Saman Ghoddos has not quite hit the ground how we thought he might done, coming from Östersunds, pretty highly rated, really, back in Sweden. That they thought he might be someone even bigger clubs were looking at least anyway. And he's not quite been the spark they needed. And they've brought in Seydou Guirassy, who was at Cologne, who had a couple of decent moments the weekend in his first game, and he had a couple of decent moments when I watched him back in Germany last season, at least anyway, before their relegation. He just feels like, again, very similar to Caen, although they've got a slightly different style of attackers. If they can get Konaté fit, that would be massive, but if they can just get someone else to get a bit of a spark going, it just feels like in a couple of games they could pick up a couple of results, they can be going. But in all honesty, looking at this game, and before we go on to predictions, Jez, it just feels like one of those games where really the loser of this one is going to be really hindered. I mean, they're both in poor form. The other teams are slowly starting to pull away, with Monaco starting to pick up. You actually fear for both of them, really. So it's vital someone wins this. Who gets it?
To be honest, I'm tempted to go for a draw, and I was going to say 0-0. I'll be a bit more generous and say 1-1, but it's going to be one of the. It's such a stereotype, but you feel like it's going to be one of those matches where it could be decided by a mistake rather than someone doing something special.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I built that up like Sky does it Super Sundays, doesn't it? I did a good job there. If they do need any hiring, that's all I'll do all the hype you need for it. But yeah, I completely agree, Jess. It's funny. This one is my head saying that Amiens have been better in the last couple of weeks, even though they have been losing because of their defensive solidity, that they might just nick it 1-0. But my heart is saying that Caen do this every single year to us. And this is the kind of game that they nick a 2-0 win and just think, and then maybe they perform better in the next game as well. And you think, okay, they might just have enough to pull away. So I'm going for a 2-0 Caen with it. It's a classic game for them to sneak it and carry on doing what they do, which is just nick a couple of points and stay above that dotted line, which is all that matters really for some teams. I know not every team would like that, but I'm sure they'll be happy with the results. On to a team that's playing that are currently below them, but that may change by the time the fixture comes around. They're taking on Monaco, is taking on Montpellier at the weekend, and it's been a funny January, really, for Montpellier, Jez. We were saying before in our half-term awards how good they've been, how good Delors and Laborde had done, and they connected brilliantly for that goal in the derby against Nîmes at the weekend. But at the same time, they were really bad in the first half, and they conceded, and they probably should have been 2 or 3 behind if not for Lecomte, and never really created anything other than the actual goal they scored. And that has sort of been symptomatic of what they have been over January. They've not been quite as exciting. They've not been quite as solid, and maybe this is the classic Montpellier fall away at the second half of the season.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I think if I remember rightly, that's pretty much what they did last year. Certainly, the second half wasn't as strong, and you can't put it all down to that. But you wonder if maybe the second half of the season, Hilton obviously is pretty old, and Congre isn't a spring chicken. Maybe it's kind of catching up with some of their older players. And I think we've also talked in the past about how Delors, especially, maybe Laborde as well, kind of not mood players, but I guess purple patch players. But I mean, the defense is still staying strong, and the fact that they've, while not playing well, still somehow unbeaten in 4, even if 3 of them were draws, kind of says a lot for how important it is to be solid at the back. And Nîmes, because it's a local derby, it's always a little bit different. And Nîmes have been very good at times this year. So to come away from your local rival, away from home, with a draw isn't necessarily such a bad result, even if they did start, even if they are further ahead than them in the table. A solid enough win against Caen the previous match. So I don't think they should be too concerned with their form for the moment. It definitely has gone down a level or two, and they'll hope that they can pick it up. But it hasn't been, well, like I said, they're still difficult to beat, and everyone around them is still dropping points here and there. So I think they're still well in touch for the possibility of a European place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Delors and Laborde falling that classic. I think you did it right. Of sort of hot patch players, I always call it the Wayne Rooney effect. Of they'll go on a 5-6 game goal scoring streak and then have 10 off, and then 6 back on again where they look like world beaters again, and then they're 10 games off. But yeah, it's been funny for them. I mean, like you say, they do still look solid. They obviously got clean sheets still against Rennes and Caen, and they've only conceded 4 in the last 5 games, which is still pretty solid. But the result against Nantes was poor. They drew against Dijon, and that wasn't particularly great. They didn't really create anything against Rennes. It was sort of a free hit at home to Caen in the midweek previously, and then the game against Nîmes, they just didn't quite click in the same way. I don't know if it's sometimes the midfield, like you say, the ages of the centre backs. I don't think the full backs have been as inventive as well and as creative and adding to that attacking play that they have. It just feels like maybe they need to tighten the screws, and against a Monaco side that might finally have that jump start that we've talked about previously. Jez, obviously the win at the weekend was massive. It didn't come without its own pitfalls, but they just needed maybe a little bit of a boost of something going their way, because there was a lot of games where they played well and lost. Finally, this was much more of those play okay and win, and got the result they needed. And then heading to a Montpellier side that in a little bit more of a funk. But the most important thing for Monaco at the moment is, much like any team near the bottom of the table, once you get that win, is keeping the momentum going. And if there's anyone who's been good at getting winning streaks going, it has been Jardim in the past. Is this a chance for them to start now turning the corner, and a victory here would put them sort of 16th and on the trail back to recovery?
It's definitely a chance. I think that sorry, they could have been an easier match to come off the previous one, but on paper it's still a very, very strong team and should be nowhere near third from bottom. And I think visiting the Mosson is not at all easy, but they could also have had a much harder match to follow up with. And I think, I know it was their first home win, but still, a win at home to Toulouse isn't anything particularly special to write home about. It's how they kick on from that. And I think it's this kind of match. If they get a result from this match, that's where they can really sort of have a big confidence boost, and also it will make a lot of other teams think, Monaco are back. This isn't, they're not going to be a walkover anymore. So I think it's an important match for them in several different ways, obviously points wise, but confidence wise and momentum wise as well.
I think you're absolutely right, Jez. And looking at their fixtures ahead, they're not really getting any easier either. If they're wanting momentum to go, Nantes at home, Lyon at home, it's not ideal. And then March does get a little bit softer before they face Lille, and before they face Paris Saint-Germain, they've got a couple of fixtures, including Guingamp as well. But it just felt like, I don't know, that game just felt like a turning of the tide kind of game. Not because Monaco just won a game. I think that's sort of a too simplistic way of looking at it, really. And that it's also not the fact that Toulouse were poor, Monaco did ride their luck as well, but it felt like because of that luck that they just maybe their season's turning. I thought Subasic was good, and having him back in goal just gave them a bit more confidence, even though he does have those moments where he sort of has what the English would call, I suppose, a brain fart, really, where he has those moments of madness, but at the same time, he does have really excellent games in him, and I think the confidence he instilled in the players was better. I thought that the midfield had a little bit more of a controlled sense about it. And instantly, what I like about it is what we'd worried about previously is the fact that they weren't really scoring enough or creating much, especially sort of towards the end of December. They had that run where in the last 4 games, they only scored a goal against Lorient in the Cup, and that really wasn't ideal. But I think the fact they got Golovin firing again now with a couple of goals in a couple of games, it's positive to see him get on top of things now under Jardim, because from memory, I don't know if you know this off by heart, just, but did Golovin play under Jardim? I think he was still injured before he was sacked, didn't he? Because I don't think Golovin had quite recovered before Jardim left. Maybe he's found the sort of unlock code for him almost. But also, I love Martins already. So he's exactly what kind of Monaco had missed in those areas, is that they have Ronnie Lopez, who's a great player at getting in behind teams and playing in terms of sort of last man runs, at least anyway, to score goals, and great if in a creative sense going in front of players. And Falcao's great at running in behind, and they've got Golovin, who's sort of a deep line midfielder that can sort of arrive in the box at least anyway, deep, sort of a Lampard-esque sort of player. They had creators like Fabregas who like playing from deep, but they had no one between those channels who wanted to carry the ball and dribble and use the pace and try and drive at teams. And that's instantly what Martins has done since he's come in both the games against Guingamp and Toulouse. He picks up the ball and he drives at teams to the byline, and he got 2 great assists. I thought the fact that he sort of is the change of pace that they needed, and it just feels that those couple of moments of extra creativity and a little bit more solidity in midfield, if they can keep finding that a little bit more, if they can be a bit stronger there, I just feel like they might be turning a corner, and that would be a massive thing. With Sidibe back as well, he played relatively well. I think Ballatore was a great signing. They just maybe have just found a way to slowly turn a corner. I think Adrien Silva would be important as a sort of a linchpin in the midfield, as a holder there if they go away from the 3 at the back. Kudu's a nice change of pace if they need it as well. But maybe, just maybe, I just have a feeling, I'll come on to your prediction in a second, Jess, but I just think Monaco might nick this one. I think it might be a 2-1 Monaco win. It just feels that maybe the tide is starting to turn the right way. We thought this maybe on the previous one, but it just feels like the right moment for them. I don't know what you think about this, Jess, but what's your prediction on this game?
I think everything you say is right, and if you can't be good, be lucky, and Jardim has come back to a very good newly fit squad, and I've said it before and I'll keep saying it, has been given the tools to work with that Henry never had, and so it still leaves bad taste for me, but I certainly still expect them to get out of this, but I'll say, just to be different, just for this match, maybe it's a little bit, maybe not everything is completely galvanised, and I'll go the other way and say 2-1 Montpellier, just because of home advantage.
It's an interesting
Not that
one.
means anything much for Monaco, but
no, it doesn't really change for them, at least anyway. But at the same time, it just feels like even a draw here kind of keeps the momentum going with how Montpellier are and how they are in the team. As long as they don't really lose this game and try and win that next home game against Nantes, then you can keep the momentum going either way. But I just have that inkling that they might nick this one.
I certainly don't have any worries for Monaco overall. I don't think there's any doubt they'll kind of get clear of the relegation zone.
Yeah, I think the only worry they have left really is the fact that a lot of their bigger games against the more difficult sides, I'm thinking the Lyon game, the PSG game, Lille as well, you would add into the list now. They're just a little bit spread out. If they were all in one big block and they got them out of the way. Yeah, my only worry is that they'll get a knock in one of those games and they'll lose a couple, and then that will sort of escalate if teams around them get any results as well. So I think it's vitally important in these spaces before they play Lyon in a couple of weeks' time to make sure they keep picking up points now, to make sure that if they lose, say, 3-4-0 against Lyon, that it doesn't completely knock them back to square one, and then they come up a game that they need to win and they lose that, and it snowballs from there. They need to keep that momentum going, in my opinion, at least. Anyway, on to things for two teams that are looking upwards instead and sort of chasing for Europe. And there's a real glut of teams between 10th and 4th, and those are the two sides that are meeting in Rennes and Saint-Etienne. And it's been a week off for Ligue, but Rennes have had a really busy week, to be fair. They've got the win last weekend. They got a victory in the Coupe de France as well against Lille. Has the caveat that Lille had a very early red card, really, that has obviously helped them, even though they did go ahead in that one. But at the same time, Stéphane, it's been a little bit more turgid at the sort of back in January. They sort of slipped back into themselves in the games, especially the loss to Guingamp and the draw to Montpellier. They should have done better. They were thumped by Paris, but win against Amiens and a win against Lille, that just feels like maybe Stéphane, what we had said before December was that he needed a moment of things going against him to see how he would react, and we've probably seen the little bit of the reaction now. The fact that they've come back in a game that they were losing against a good side despite being 10 men, that we've maybe seen a little bit more from them. They just need to put things a little bit more together, because especially Ben Arthur, Jez, he's starting to find a little bit of those moments, but he's not quite clicked into gear. That just feels synonymous of how Rennes are at the moment as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I don't think there's any doubt that Stéphane's got the team playing with more character, and certainly not. You're not seeing heads go down in the way that maybe that they have done previously. Even a game like Amiens coming into the final 10 minutes, possibly the former Rennes teams may have given up and not settled for the draw, but ended up getting a draw. And at least this team under Stéphane is still, going for the win the whole time. But yeah, I'm still not 100% convinced about the football they're playing. I still think they are getting a little bit lucky at times. And as you said, even against Lille, it was a strong Lille team, but you have to think that the league isn't the cup isn't the priority for them right now, and playing for a lot of the match with 10 men. So I'm not taking credit away from Rennes, who did really well to come back from behind with two relatively late goals, and also the fact that they're coming from someone off the bench is good, because it shows that they've got talented players coming off the bench and a bit more strength in depth. But it is still a sketchy win against Amiens. It is still a sketchy cup win. I'm not yet convinced that they're really back on track. This match, however, I think I think this could be the match of the weekend. Two potentially really good footballing teams, probably quite evenly matched. I think even got a feeling their last 4 matches or something of them with draws as well. So, and actually quite a lot to play for. So, and this is the kind of match if he can mastermind a good win in this match, then it would feel, I think, a little bit like a different kind of Rennes to the last 2-3, several seasons really. So yeah, I think it's a really good test for them, and I think it should be a cracker.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing as well about that game against Amiens, is they rode their luck a little bit. They maybe should have grabbed more, really. I think Saul will be really disappointed that he didn't grab a couple, and Niang had a chance near the end as well. But even the substitutes and the players that did start, it's Zephan's come in from the cold. Mexer's got a start there as well. Niamsi's got a substitute appearance on his belt. Unu had sort of been moved out as well. He got onto the pitch as well. I just feel like Stéphane's making sure that his entire squad is happy, because he's going to need them all. The Europa League is coming up against Betis as well.
It's a really tough. Well, look at the next 6 matches. None of them are easy. I mean, on paper, the easiest is, I guess, Marseille at home. But with Marseille, they're such a mood team. Who knows? They could be firing by then. So yeah, it's a tough 6 weeks coming, or 6 matches, and I think he is going to need every part of his squad.
Yeah, so I think it was quite a shrewd move to get them on side, really, to bring on a couple of players that maybe haven't featured a little bit. Starts players like Zephan, who'd not been featured really under Lamouche as well. So I think it was quite a clever move, and that even though they looked out a result, which is what they needed at least, get those players on side, because this next month for Rennes is going to be massive, really, especially the Europa League games. It's been a long while since they've been in that kind of scenario, and they're facing a Saint-Etienne side that have had a little bit of a rest, really, more than anything, really. Obviously, because they're not in cup action, they've not played midweek, and they've had the look of, well, I wouldn't necessarily, let's say, look, but at least they had a game called off at the weekend. You'd rather be playing football in any regard. But it'd be interesting to see how they change, because there's midfielders coming in, midfielders going out. We believe that Oli Selnesh is pretty close, as well as Sheikh Mbengwe, which is not really a matter for Saint-Etienne. I don't think they'd be too bothered to see the back of the left back, really. But both of those are close to moves to China. That window is still open until the 24th. So whether they move immediately is another question entirely. But it looks like the Norwegian's going to be out of the squad, and in come Varda from Bordeaux on loan, and they've also brought in trying to remember the other name. Yeah, it was
Benasser.
Yes, yeah, of course it was. It was in my head. I don't know why it skipped out, but it's going to be interesting to see how they are integrated to a side, because they were great in midfield. When Villa's had a very good season, we've already discussed how good Selnes has been, because he was in our or very close to. I think he just missed out on our team of the season, really. So it's going to be interesting to see how those two adapt in, because they are two talented players, but maybe haven't had the game time they've deserved recently, and a chance for them to start anew in these 6 months and fight for a place in Lever's team.
Yeah, there's clearly a place for at least one of them in that team, and actually, talking about needing a reaction, Saint-Etienne are coming off the back of two defeats and a draw, so they haven't won in a while either. So that they need to show that their pedigree and sort of get back to the really good form that they were in sort of earlier in the month. And yeah, I think a lot of that will be down to how quickly those one or two new signings settle in, because obviously it's an important part of the pitch. It's going to be kind of well fought over with Rennes, and if you assume that maybe, certainly I'd have thought Benasser could get a start. If he can settle and fit into that team, fit in alongside Villa as quickly as possible, then I think that could be the key to the match. If Saint-Etienne's midfield fails to get a foothold, and players like Andre get to control the match, then Saint-Etienne could be struggling.
Yeah, and it's funny looking at the games proceeding after this one as well. They've got Strasbourg at midweek. They'll have PSG in the next weekend. Game away to Dijon isn't the most tough one, but then away to Marseille, like you said, Jez, they might be different. And then Lille, it's a real horror run for them, which if they lose this game, Strasbourg is maybe a little bit more 50-50, and you'd expect them to win Dijon. But at the same time, a couple of weeks ago, when they beat Lyon, when they managed that result against Marseille, especially, when they were beating Lyon and they'd beat Marseille, we'd mentioned that the Lyon result would disappoint them, but the performance will please them at least, and they'll still be in the Champions League run. But at the same time, because of that glut of teams, we've got, you look behind them, I know they have a game in hand on some of them, but Montpellier on 36, Strasbourg on 35, they're on 37, Marseille on 34, Reims on 34, Nice on 34, and Rennes themselves on 33. You think that if they lose that game, and then they've got a couple of difficult games coming up, if they start dropping points, they all of a sudden go out of Champions League contention and out of European competition altogether if other teams start picking up results. So it's a strange, nervy point for Lever, where they really need a result in this one, and more than anything, they need to try and pick up a win. And it feels strange going from one extreme to the other in a space of sort of 3 weeks. But they are still a creative side now with Cabela and Kazri as well. They've been good going in those kind of areas. They were great in midfield, but added a couple. But this is such a crucial game for them now, really, with that run in, because they want to try and keep on the coattails of Lyon if they can, because we'll talk about Lyon in a moment. But they're always handy for a slip up on occasions, and you don't want to be too far away from them if you can avoid it. But like you say, this is probably going to be the game of the weekend, Jez. But have you got a winner in this one? It's going to be close.
It is going to be close. I mean, I'm torn between a 2-2 draw and Rennes sneaking a 2-1 win. I think Saint-Etienne will, of the two, be slightly more kind of negative, just because I don't think a draw away to Rennes is a bad result at all. It is a tough run, but I think if they should be thinking in terms of getting 4 points from the next 2 matches, and in theory, Strasbourg at home should be the more makeable of the two. So I think, if they can get out with a draw from this one, keep Rennes that little bit of distance behind them, that's kind of one of their rivals that they need to worry about a little bit less. I'll go 2-2.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going exactly the same. I think it's going to be a very close game, and Saint-Etienne confirm that as well. I do sort of break the conversation at the moment. I do apologise for this because there is some breaking news happening at the moment. It's through the Press Association. I've seen it, but it is going through other outlets that Dorset police have confirmed a body recovered from the plane which crashed in the English Channel has been formally identified as professional footballer Emiliano Sala. Really upsetting news to hear, but I'm sure that the important thing now is our thoughts and with the family at this moment in time, because that must be horrible news to be receiving. But I'm sure at the same time they'll be relieved to know exactly where it is, and hopefully all this mess that's come out in the last couple of days as well, which was really disappointing to see, and I don't think we'll sort of speak any more on it really. Hopefully that can be sort of behind closed doors without the knowledge, and hopefully now they can move on in peace, and all the best to his family. We are thoughts are with them. But let's finish off this one tonight, Jez, with a game that is interesting, really, to be fair, for both sides, because Nice will be hosting Lyon, and Lyon have had a pretty good week, to be fair. They'll be delighted to have taken on PSG and won. They'll be delighted to have gotten out of what could have been a tricky tie against Guingamp, given that their cup pedigree and the fact that they sort of have that nothing to lose attitude in the cup competitions at the moment, and they got through that one as well. Dembele started scoring goals in a more consistent format. That's a real major positive, and things are on the up for Genesio at the moment. But we know with Lyon, as it has been all season, that just on those moments where it does look like everything's rosy and everything for Ligue, it sort of turns on its head. So we can't get ahead of ourselves too much, but Lyon do look like they're finding a little bit of form again.
Yeah, 5 wins in a row is great form by any standards. And okay, a couple of them were against Amiens and Guingamp, but the other 2 were against come from behind to win against Saint-Etienne and a come from behind to win against PSG. So certainly nothing to be sniffed at. And as we all know, the frustrating thing is that they can win those kinds of matches and then go missing in what looks like much easier matches. And I'm sure that there are quite a few fans, or football fans, and certainly Lyon fans, who are expecting them to follow up a win against PSG with a lame defeat against Guingamp tonight. So although sort of relatively straightforward win against Guingamp shouldn't be anything huge to write home about, it's for Lyon, as bizarre as it sounds, that's actually quite a decent result, or something, a positive for fans to take. And they'll certainly be hoping that they carry that form on, but in just the same way, they could easily lose against a team who's coming off a 4-0 defeat. And earlier in the season, when I think it was Nice's first win of the season, was their win at I was going to say the Jardin, at the Groupama, whatever it's called now, which again was sort of classic Lyon of the time, allowing a team really in the doldrums to get one over on them. And I suppose in a sense, the two teams are coming into this match in a relatively similar way. Lyon's in better form, Nice in more shaky form, and the Lyon fans will certainly be hoping that they don't do a Lyon, basically.
Yeah, it's been interesting for them this season, especially looking at some of the stats and bits like that. You would think that with the firepower they've got in Dembele now and Fekir and Aouar, Traore, Depay, the top scorer's got 7 this season. And while some people will go, okay, Dembele's got 7, Fekir's got 7, Aouar's got 6, Traore's got 6, and Depay's got 5. That's not too shabby. Then the goals are being shared around. But when you look at the fact that I know it's a bit of a jump, but Paris Saint-Germain's strike force are all in several goal scorers. They've got Pepe with plenty of goals as well. All the teams with one solid goal scorer. It's strange to see that one of them hasn't sort of at least edged a little bit in front of them, and that's maybe holding them back a little bit. But what I have liked this season, and I'm sure they'll probably be highlighted at the weekend as well, is and it's been highlighted a couple of times. I think sneakily Jason Denayer has been a really good signing for them. They've really been struggling for a centre back for a long while. I think Marcelo last season was pretty solid, but not quite at the level that Denayer has been this season. Not only has he contributed a couple of goals, but he had an excellent goal line clearance at the weekend as well. Had some real strong performances. I just feel like maybe he's someone that might just be a basis if you can get another good defender in next to him. Although I know a lot of people are a big fan of Marcelo, but I think he's been a bit indifferent this season. If they can get someone else next to him, they could be really solid. And it's great to see him sort of building the promise that he had when he was sort of at Manchester City previously and other clubs as well. But as for Nice, Jez, like you mentioned, they've been a bit stop-starty all season, really. And we've praised them at times for being really solid defensively, but they have their little lapses. And January was pretty good for them. I mean, they beat Bordeaux, they beat Nîmes, they got draws against Monaco and Rennes away from home. But it was just a game on Friday where they absolutely thumped by Lille. I don't think they were ever really in the game, and it will infuriate Vieira. They've not really brought anyone in. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about this one, Jez, but it just felt like one of those games that even though they had been okay in January and done okay, decently, that's an alarm bell game, isn't it? To lose that heavily, even against a good side, they were just decimated.
Well, I mean, maybe if they're looking for good omens, I was just checking back that first win of the season at Lyon followed 4-0 decimation against Dijon. And it's the problem with Nice this season, I think, is clearly that they're just not scoring enough goals. But defensively, for the most part, they've been solid. Apart from that, basically, there's sort of been 3 outliers where they've conceded 4 goals. Weirdly, 2 of them have been to Dijon and Toulouse, who aren't exactly the strongest teams around. Last week was away to Lille, who are obviously in fantastic form. So in a way, there's no. I was going to say no shame in that. Certainly less shame in that than the other 2. But you did. It was the fact that it was really a capitulation. There was very little fight there, and I don't know if it's the reaction to the fact that it wasn't I was going to say not a successful transfer window. I'm not even sure they tried to make it successful. They didn't really seem that into bringing anyone in, or it's difficult to know what the problem, apart from the lack of goal scoring. It's difficult to know what the problem is because they have been in recent weeks in good form. They are a relatively young team, but they are sort of gradually gelling. I think Vieira is for the most part doing a good job. Possibly the stuff going on off the pitch has affected them. I find that unlikely, but it's a possibility. But you look at the team. There's only Dante that's of those who started against Lille. Dante is the only sort of really experienced outfield player there. So and players, Atal, who we've all spoken so highly of, and a couple of weeks ago had a storming match, had just one of those terrible matches to forget against Lille. I guess it just happens, but again, in the same ways we've spoken earlier about Monaco and even about Lyon, a lot of it is how you react to the previous match. In Lyon's case, how you react to a win. Possibly in Nice's case is how Vieira can get his players to react after a heavy defeat. And both other times this season that they've conceded for, I think they've immediately responded with a win. And possibly the fact that they're playing at home, and maybe even the fact that they're playing sort of headline team may help them to sort of really refocus. But yeah, it's not ideal, and it's difficult. A little like we were saying with Bordeaux, it's difficult to kind of situate where Nice are at the moment, because they're doing some really good things, and because of the nature of the table and the fact that it's so concertinaed in the middle, they're only a win or so away from being right back in European contention as well. But it just feels that somehow they're kind of hanging on by their fingernails, whereas the other teams are flying a little bit more.
Yeah, it's been such a strange team this season, but I just felt like if I was Vieira in that stage, so frustrating to go from a January where they looked solid, they grabbed a couple of goals, but it weren't key, and they'll also be annoyed that back in November they really did well against Lille at home. They were strong. They made sure that they couldn't counter them too quickly, and just so frustrating after some good work really to have a result that like on paper it looks like a hammering, but watching it back was a real sort of bend over the knee moment, wasn't it? It was really hard to watch if you were an Nice fan. I thought, because Lille were absolutely all over them. It could have been 5, 6, 7 on another day if other things had gone their way really, and just must really irk a player like Vieira, and I'm sure that we're going to get some kind of reaction in this one in one way or the other. So what do you think the score will be in this one, Jez? It's going to be, I think it might be quite an interesting game, but there's going to be some kind of reaction from Vieira's side, surely.
I've got absolutely no idea what to predict for this one. But I mean, I could see Lyon winning comfortably, or I could see Nice nicking another 1-0 win, and I think I'm going to go with that one.
Yeah, I just feel like I would hate to get on the bad side of Vieira on the best of days, really, to be fair. I don't think it would have been a very pleasant week for any of the Nice players. I'm sure he's looked blood and thunder all week, and because of that, I think it's going to be a 0-0 draw. I think that I sort of highlighted that Lyon have spread the goals around, but have to, at times really struggled to break down teams, and Nice, when they're on their game, can be really difficult to break down. And that 4-0 last week was a real misnomer, and there's absolutely no chance Vieira allows that to happen again. I can't imagine that 2 weeks in a row they'll get a battering. Otherwise, those players may never see the light of day again. But I still tune in on Sunday for the BT game as best I could. Hopefully I'm wrong, but it feels like a Vieira 0-0. Maybe Nice try and nick it 1-0 or something like that. But a draw seems very on par for both teams this season. That Nice will react defensively, and Lyon, after a couple of a really great performance, especially in the league, will sort of dither against a team that they really would be looking to beat. That's all for this week. Is my thanks to Jez and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the main show, which will be back on Monday. But for now, enjoy your weekend of football.